was sitting in my usual corner booth inside Bayou Bistro, the place I built with my own hands and reputation, when everything in my world shifted in a way I never saw coming. The morning sun was pouring through the windows, the smell of black coffee mixed with the scent of cigarettes in the air, and my lieutenants were gathered around me going over business for the week. It was a normal day in New Orleans, or as normal as life gets when you run half the city. Then the door burst open so hard that every man in the room reached for a gun at the same time. I looked up expecting a threat. Instead, I saw a little boy. He couldn't have been older than 6. Dirt smudged his cheeks, tears dripping off his chin. He was trembling so hard I could see it from across the room. He looked around the restaurant like he had no idea if he was allowed to breathe. Then his eyes landed on me. He ran straight to my table with such desperation that every guard stepped forward, but I lifted a hand for them to stop. The kid skidded to a halt right in front of me, chest heaving, face red from crying. "Please help," he cried. "They're hurting my mom." Those words hit me harder than any bullet I've taken. The whole place went silent. My right-hand man Patrick stared at me like even he didn't know what I would do. No one interrupts a meeting with me. Not a grown man. Definitely not a child. But this kid didn't care. He was shaking like the world was ending, and still he stood there. I stood up slowly so I wouldn't scare him more. Smoke drifted off the end of my cigarette as I looked down at him. I could see fingerprints on his small arms, fresh bruises, fear in his eyes that I recognized far too well. It woke something in me I thought I had buried years ago. I knelt to his level. "What's your name, kid?" I asked softly, in a voice my men hadn't heard me use in years. "Charlie," he whispered. "My mom told me to run. She told me to find help. I saw your cars outside and I ran here." I felt something cold and electric go through me. This boy didn't come to the police. He didn't go to a neighbor. He came to me. Somehow, even at 6 years old, he recognized power when he saw it. "Where is she?" I asked. Charlie pointed toward the street with a shaking hand. His words tumbled out in a frantic rush as he described a small yellow house a few blocks away. And I realized something else. I knew that house. It belonged to Hank Porter, one of my low-level distributors. A man I tolerated, only because he kept his head low and his numbers right. A man I had never cared to meet outside of business. And a man who I now wanted to kill with my bare hands. "Stay with Annie," I told Charlie, nodding toward my hostess. "She'll get you pancakes." "I'll get your mom." Charlie grabbed my hand for a moment before letting go. His tiny fingers were ice cold. That single touch sealed something inside me I didn't expect. Something protective. Something old. Something dangerous. Within seconds, 4 black SUVs pulled out of the parking lot. I slid into the lead vehicle, tension coiling inside me with every block we passed. As we turned onto Dauphine Street, the yellow house came into view. A scream tore through the quiet morning air. It was sharp, terrified, and cut off too fast. That's when I stopped being the calculated man I'd built myself into. That scream broke something loose inside me. I was out of the SUV before it stopped moving. I didn't wait for backup, I didn't plan, I didn't think. I just moved with a fury that felt like fire in my blood. I hit the front door with my boot. The wood cracked in half, slamming into the wall behind it as I stepped into a room filled with broken furniture and shattered glass. Then I saw her. A woman with copper hair lay crumpled against the wall. Blood trickled from her temple. Her arms were covered in bruises. Even through the pain, she was beautiful in a way that twisted something in my chest. And standing over her was Porter. He turned toward me, confusion and alcohol all over his face. "Boss, what?" The words stopped when he saw my eyes. The fear that hit him was instant. Because he knew. He knew he had just signed his own death. I stepped toward him, slow and steady. "The boy found me," I said, "and he made a better choice than you did." His wife, Samantha, looked up at me through hazy, pain-filled eyes. When she whispered my name, she wasn't surprised. She was afraid because she knew exactly who I was. That fear should have meant nothing to me, but it didn't. It bothered me. Porter lifted his hands, stammering excuses about a family matter. I didn't care. I hauled him off the ground by the throat and slammed him into the wall hard enough to rattle the whole house. "You touch her again," I said, my voice calm and deadly, "and you won't live long enough to regret it." Samantha whispered, "Please, not in front of Charlie." The way she said her son's name hit me harder than any weapon. I released Porter and turned to her. "Pack your things," I told her. "You and your boy are coming with me." She stared at me like she didn't know whether to fear me or trust me, but she stood. And that was the moment everything in my life began to change. When Samantha stepped toward me that day, leaning on the wall for balance, something shifted inside me that I couldn't explain. I had dragged people from danger before. I had protected those loyal to me. But this was different. This was personal in a way that made no sense, in a way that unsettled the careful control I lived by. Charlie's mother didn't speak as she gathered a small bag from the bedroom. Her hands shook, but her movements were steady, practiced. It told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't the first time she had packed to run. Just the first time she'd had a chance. My men stood outside the broken doorway, weapons visible, faces expressionless. They had seen me angry before. They had never seen this. Not this kind of fury. Not directed at something that wasn't business. When Samantha stepped back into the living room, Charlie's name almost slipped from her lips, but she pressed her mouth shut, holding the pain inside. Her eyes found mine, and for the first time I understood what fear mixed with hope looked like. "Let's go," I said gently. Patrick opened the SUV door for her, and she climbed in with slow, pained movements. I slid in beside her, not because I had to, but because leaving her alone didn't sit right. The drive back to my estate was quiet. Samantha stared out the window, her reflection faint in the glass. Every so often she flinched from the pain in her ribs. She tried to hide it, but I noticed. I noticed everything. Charlie had her eyes, gray with flecks of blue. The kind of eyes that saw too much. I had no idea why that detail mattered to me, but it did. "Your son is safe," I said. Her hand tightened around the small bag on her lap. "Thank you." 2 simple words. No crying, no dramatic gratitude, just quiet relief, strength wrapped in exhaustion. It hit me in a way I didn't expect. When we pulled into the estate, Samantha's breath caught. People react to my home in different ways. Some hunger for it, some fear it. Samantha looked overwhelmed. Not by the size or the luxury, but by what it meant. She was safe now, and she didn't know what to do with that feeling. Inside, the marble floors gleamed beneath the morning light. Charlie's laugh echoed through the hallway before we even reached the kitchen. Samantha's steps faltered. "Mom!" Charlie ran toward her with cookie crumbs on his cheek. Samantha dropped her bag and sank to her knees, ignoring the pain. She wrapped him in her arms and held him with a desperation that tore something open inside me. His small arms clung around her neck, and he buried his face against her shoulder. "You did so good," she whispered. "My brave boy." I looked away for a moment because watching them felt like watching something private, something sacred. Mrs. Bennett, my housekeeper, gave me a small nod from the kitchen doorway. The kind of nod that said, "You did the right thing." I wasn't sure why that mattered to me either. "Show them to the East Wing," I told her. "It's too much," Samantha whispered, still holding Charlie. "It's temporary," I replied, "until we figure out next steps." I didn't tell her I had no intention of letting her walk back into danger, or that I already knew Porter would be dealt with before the sun set. Some truths aren't meant for moments like this. When Dr. Hammond arrived, Samantha tried to argue at first, insisting she didn't need a doctor. One look from me, and she stopped. Not because she was scared, but because she didn't have the energy to fight help she clearly needed. Her injuries were worse than I expected. 3 cracked ribs, a concussion, bruises everywhere. Signs of old harm beneath fresh wounds. I felt something cold and sharp settle inside me as the doctor spoke. "Is she going to be okay?" Charlie asked in a small voice. "Yes," I answered before the doctor could. "She's safe now." Charlie nodded and slipped his hand into mine without hesitation. My men saw. Patrick raised an eyebrow. I ignored him. That night, after Charlie fell asleep, I found Samantha standing on her balcony, arms wrapped around herself. She looked small against the backdrop of the moonlit garden. Small, but not weak. A woman who had survived far too much. "You should be resting," I said softly. She didn't turn right away. "I can't sleep." I stepped beside her, keeping a respectful distance. "What's going to happen now?" she asked, her voice quiet but steady. "Whatever you want to happen," I answered. She let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "I don't even know what that means anymore. You don't have to decide tonight." She finally looked at me then. Her eyes were tired but clear, searching, reading me the way no one else dared to. "Why did you help us?" she asked. "You didn't know us." There were a dozen answers I could have given. Business reasons. Territory control. Image. All lies. "Your son reminded me of myself," I said instead. Samantha's eyes softened, a crack in her guarded shell. "I don't want anything from you," I added. "No debt. No favors. You and Charlie are safe here because someone should have helped you sooner." Silence lingered between us. Not heavy, not uncomfortable, just full. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispered. "You don't need to." She looked down at the garden lights, her face caught in the warm glow. There was something almost peaceful in her expression. But beneath that peace, a spark flickered. The kind of spark that can change the direction of a life. Mine included. Life in the Blake estate changed faster than I expected. What began as a temporary shelter started to feel like something else. Something I wasn't prepared for and didn't know how to name. I had built my world on iron rules, sharp lines, and cold decisions. But the moment Samantha and Charlie entered my home, those lines blurred. I found myself walking toward the east wing more often than I intended. At first I told myself it was to check security, to make sure they were settling in, to assess the threat from the Cardona family and from Porter, who I knew wouldn't stay quiet for long. But that was only part of the truth. The other part was harder to admit even to myself. I wanted to see them. The first time I heard Samantha laugh, not a polite smile or a forced sound, but a real laugh, something shifted inside me. She was sitting with Charlie in the breakfast room. He was trying to balance a spoon on his nose, failing over and over until he got it right, and she laughed like she hadn't laughed in years. It was the kind of sound I hadn't heard in my home since I became the man the city feared. It stopped me in my tracks. Mrs. Bennett glanced at me from the kitchen doorway, her eyes soft. "They're good for the house, Mr. Blake." I didn't reply, but I knew she was right. Days passed. Samantha healed slowly. Charlie thrived faster than either of us expected. He followed my men around like a shadow, asking them questions about everything from cars to why the sky was blue. Even Patrick softened around him. That alone was shocking enough to make me question the laws of the universe. But the real change happened the day Samantha and I sat in the garden while Charlie played with a butterfly he had found. He ran up to us, holding it gently in his palms. "Mr. Christian, look," he said. "It's the same color as my mom's eyes." Samantha smiled, soft and real. Her storm-gray eyes shimmered in the sunlight as the butterfly rested on her hand, a moment so simple. But it hit me hard. She looked alive again, stronger, warmer, beautiful in a way I hadn't seen the first day, when she was all bruises and fear, and I realized something dangerous. I wanted to keep them safe, not because it was the right thing to do, but because I wasn't ready to let them go. That same night, everything changed again. Patrick came to my office at dawn, a stack of surveillance photos in his hands. "Ricardo Cardona is in New Orleans," he said. "He flew in last night." I stared at the photo. The Cardona family's eldest son, known for his ambition, known for bloodshed. If he was here, it meant war. "There's more," Patrick added, placing another photo on my desk. It showed Porter, alive, walking beside Ricardo. My jaw clenched. So the man I spared had run straight into the arms of my enemies. I should have seen it coming, but I had been focused on Samantha, on Charlie, on things that made me forget the shadows around us. "He wants revenge," Patrick said quietly, "on you and on them." I didn't need Patrick to explain who them meant. That night, after Charlie was tucked into bed, I asked Samantha to come to my study. She entered carefully, one hand against the doorframe, her injuries still healing. Yet her posture had changed. She carried herself with the poise of the woman she used to be. I admired that strength more than I wanted to admit. "We have a problem," I told her as she sat across from me. Her expression shifted instantly. No panic, just alert focus. The same sharp mind that once worked in one of the best law firms in Louisiana. "Porter is back," I said. "Working with Ricardo Cardona." Her breath caught, not from fear for herself, but for her son. "They know I'm here," she said softly. "They know you know things," I corrected. "That makes you valuable and dangerous." She looked down at her hands, fingers curling slightly. "Christian, we can't stay here," she whispered. "We're too much of a risk." I stood from my chair and moved closer to her. Close enough to see the faint freckles on her cheeks. Close enough to smell the soft scent of her hair. "You became my responsibility the moment Charlie ran into my restaurant," I said. "I don't abandon what's mine to protect." She looked up sharply at the word mine, but I didn't take it back. I didn't want to. "You saved us," she whispered, "but I can't let Charlie grow up around this, around danger and violence." I know, my voice came out rougher than I intended, and that's why we end it now. She blinked. "End it?" Quote. I nodded. "Together." Surprise flickered through her eyes, and something else. Something warm that made my chest tighten. "You have knowledge of Porter's dealings," I said. "Connections, patterns, things we need. If we work together, we take down the Cardona family for good." Samantha stood slowly and walked toward the large window overlooking the moonlit garden where Charlie played earlier. "You're asking me to be your ally," she said. "I'm asking you to survive," I replied. She turned back toward me with a strength I had only glimpsed before. "Tell me the plan," she said. A simple sentence. But in that moment she became more than a guest in my home. She became my partner, and I realized something even more dangerous. I didn't want to imagine my life without her anymore. The night we set the plan into motion, the air in New Orleans felt heavier than usual. The riverfront always carried a certain tension, but this time it pulsed with something sharper, something final. I knew the Cardona family was ambitious. I knew Ricardo wanted my city. But what made my blood run cold was knowing Porter wanted Samantha and Charlie. That alone made this personal in a way I couldn't deny anymore. We watched the warehouse from a secure command room 3 blocks away. Computer screens lit Samantha's face as she monitored the camera feeds. She wasn't the bruised, terrified woman I found against that yellow wall. She was focused, sharp, steady. The woman she used to be before Porter tore her life apart. "You're sure this will work?" she asked. "It will," I said. "Because you planned it?" she asked with a small smile. "No," I answered, holding her gaze. "Because you're helping me." The look she gave me then, it settled somewhere deep in my chest, a place I had spent years keeping shut. On the screens, Ricardo arrived with his men. Porter stood beside him, looking nervous, looking desperate, looking exactly like the kind of coward who starts fires he can't survive. "The FBI is in position," Samantha said. "The phone will have everything they need to bring them down." Patrick leaned over her shoulder. "If Porter tries to run, we'll handle it." But when the operation began, chaos hit fast. Ricardo entered the warehouse expecting an ambush from me, but instead federal agents swarmed from hidden corners. His men panicked, shouting, scrambling to return fire. Everything unfolded exactly as planned, until Porter slipped away. "He's heading toward the east exit," Samantha said, standing so fast her chair rolled back. I took one look at her face and felt my blood turn to ice. "Stay here." "No," she said firmly. "He won't stop unless we stop him." Before I could argue, she reached into the drawer where Patrick kept emergency gear and took a small pistol. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't waver. She walked right toward the danger she'd run from for years. I followed. The alley behind the warehouse was dark and narrow. The hum of the river echoed in the background. Porter was hunched behind a dumpster, gripping his phone like a lifeline while he tried to delete evidence. "Deleting won't save you," I said calmly as I stepped forward. He froze. Slowly he lifted his head, and when he saw me, the last hint of color drained from his face. "This isn't my fault," he stammered. "I was forced into everything. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You hurt your wife. You hurt your son. You betrayed me. And you thought you'd walk away from it all." His eyes twitched toward the shadows. "She was mine before you took her." A cold fury rolled through me. "She was never yours. You don't own people. You hurt them because you're weak." Porter's expression twisted. He yanked a small gun from his jacket and raised it toward me, but a shot rang out before he could fire. Porter stumbled and dropped his gun, clutching his shoulder. Behind me stood Samantha. Her stance was perfect, her face set with calm determination. She didn't look afraid. She looked free for the first time in years. I walked to her slowly, keeping my eyes on hers. "I told you to stay at the command center," I said gently. "You don't get to order me around," she replied, lowering the gun without shaking. "Not when my future is involved." Our future. She didn't say it, but I felt the meaning like a heartbeat. Federal agents took Porter within minutes. As they dragged him away, he stared at Samantha with burning hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed. I stepped between them, blocking his view. "It was over the day you laid a hand on her." They shoved him into a vehicle that would take him far from New Orleans, far from her, far from Charlie, probably forever. And just like that, the danger that had followed her for years was gone. 3 months later, life felt different. Ricardo faced multiple life sentences. The Cardona organization collapsed. Porter, desperate to survive prison, testified against everyone he ever worked with. Samantha and Charlie stayed in the East Wing. No longer guests, but something closer to family. Charlie laughed freely now, chasing fireflies in the garden with the housekeeper's grandchildren. His nightmares came less and less. He had friends, toys, a school ready to welcome him. And Samantha, she stood stronger every day. One evening she joined me on the balcony overlooking the garden. The air smelled like jasmine. Charlie was running across the lawn wearing a paper crown he had made himself. The prosecutors called. I told her, "Everything's settled. They won't bother you again." She exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. "He can't hurt us anymore." "No," I said softly. "No one can." We watched Charlie for a moment in silence. Then Samantha turned to me, her eyes catching the last gold of sunset. "I've made a decision," she said. A strange anxiety twisted in my chest. "About what?" "About us." Those 2 words made my heart beat harder than gunfire ever had. "I'm done pretending this is temporary," she said. "I'm done pretending we don't feel what we feel. You protected us. Not because of business, not because of strategy, because you care." Her voice softened. "And I care too." I stepped closer. "Samantha," she shook her head gently, "you don't have to name it. Just let it be real." I reached up and touched her jaw, the place where a bruise once lived. Her skin was warm now, soft, safe. When I kissed her, it wasn't fire or desperation. It was quiet, steady, certain, like something I had been waiting for my whole life. Charlie looked up from the garden and saw us. He pointed and tugged Mrs. Bennett's sleeve excitedly. She smiled and led him inside, giving us the moment that changed everything. Later that night, Samantha and I sat in the library, her head on my shoulder as we talked about the future. Not in fantasies, not in fear, but in practical decisions. Stable plans. Real life. Partners in all things, I said, turning toward her. She smiled, touching my hand. Partners in all things, she agreed. And for the first time in years, I felt something fill the empty spaces inside me. A home, a family, a future worth fighting for.